And he maintains, I will use this to correct something, because he maintains, so I wrote down Keanu Reeves, and it was just at the time The Matrix had come out. Now at this time I had a shaved head, right? And so he did the whole thing on me, the Pradier thing of the letter X. And I was like, what the fuck is going on here? You know, like, this guy, like, he maintains I was wearing a full length leather jacket in this, because I didn't own a full length leather jacket until a couple of years later. But I did have a suit style 3/4 length leather jacket, because I was and still am a Paul Zenon geek, and Paul Zenon started wearing a leather jacket, and I had found this leather jacket. But I think, to Peter's credit, I was standing the other side of the counter. The jacket was just below my waist, so he probably just thinks it went all the way to the floor. It didn't. But his point is, he probably didn't even need to use it. He used the wallet, because I was wearing a full length leather jacket. I had a shaved head, and I thought of the tricks. It couldn't have been more obvious.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Desert Island Tricks. It's very true that today we have another fantastic guest. In fact, we've got, I guess in a weird sort of way, royal magic circle royalty is what I was trying to say there, because he is currently the close-up magician of the year. And I was fortunate enough to actually see it live in the Magic Circle Theatre when it was all going off. And he was phenomenal. He's also a former employee of Alakazam Magic. And even Sarah, who is a good friend of mine, he was her magician at her wedding, and part of the reason that she wanted to get into magic. He is a lovely person. You would have seen him on sort of archive things from Alakazam as well, notably some of the the hypnosis releases, in which he was very funny to watch indeed. So that being said, today's guest, he's laughing on camera, is Mr. Chris Harding. Hello, Chris.
Hello, thank you so much for having me, and for reminding me about the hypnosis DVDs. They were really good. I think they were the first things back in the day, when that kind of stuff became really popular. I can still remember that, because I think I went on the hypnosis course that Anthony Jackman was doing up in Derby. I came back and I said to Peter, I think this would be a really good idea for like a DVD release. I think it's a really good thing. It's really popular. And Peter, just being like the ever kind of, just happy to give anything a go and trust all the people around him, he said, yeah, that's great. I'll get Russ down for a couple of days. I'm going to be on holiday at the time, but if you just get the whole thing put together and get it all filmed, that would be great. And and we filmed it. It was like 4 discs. It was amazing. It was really popular, but it's intimidating when someone says, yeah, you oversee all that. I won't be here, but if I come back in this rubbish, then you're in trouble. But they were great fun to do. Peter's always been good like that, actually, with spotting really good things. It's like when we did the Mike Vincent DVDs, he knew that I was kind of a bit of a card sort of geek and that, and said, oh, do you want to be on them with him? I was like, yeah, great. And then suddenly felt really nervous about the idea of being on it as well, with someone that's kind of that knowledgeable and sort of quite intimidating. But they're brilliant. No, it was amazing. But I avoided conventions for a while after the hypnosis DVDs came out, because there was lots of people kind of hunting me down, looking to kind of target me as a potential hypnotic subject.
Yeah, I remember watching those. I think I specifically remember a genie moment from those DVDs, yes, which stood out, which was very funny.
Oh God, don't. It's all coming back now. I think it was my phase where Peter will probably remember and sort of take the mic, rightly so. Well, my phase where I used to wear a tank top all the time and a tie, like a tie tank top and a shirt. And I sort of used to mildly eccentric kind of look. But yeah, I certainly got my comeuppance on those. But they were great fun to do. And actually still very, very good instruction today. They're really well filmed. And it's not just Anthony on there. It was Kev, who was Anthony's mate, and also Amit. Do you know Amit?
Amit was on there, yeah.
I was a brilliant magician, amazing, really funny guy. But he's the one to avoid if you want to avoid anyone kind of doing slightly mischievous hypnosis. I think he's a bit of a tyrant, but a lovely man as well. So, yes.
So I'm really interested to see
Good.
what your list is like, because you've also been around, obviously because you used to work for a magic shop as well, you've been around an absolute metric ton of magic in your lifetime. So getting 8 tricks down would have been, I presume, quite difficult for you.
It's really tough, but it's a really good exercise. And look, it would be really easy to sit and look at what you go out and do commercially and just pick 8 of those things. And there are some things here, definitely that. There are a couple of things here that I do more stand up. There's one that's something that's probably quite a curveball, but they've all got a kind of, there's a reason why they're all on there. You know, I like the idea, if you put yourself on a desert island, you're going to be stuck there. What would you do all day? What ones would you actually do? And what this sort of forces you to do is think of tricks, not just the ones that you love, but ones that you could actually envisage yourself just being stuck with for such a long period of time. So yeah, I mean, there's a range as well, because like you say, I mean, I've been doing magic as a job, like a gigging job, since I'm 17, 18, so 39 this year, 38, 39, so quite a long time, kind of 20 something years. But everything sort of follows a certain pattern in my sort of career where I've gone to with it. You know, I sort of started when I was a kid, 5, 6 years old, like everyone. I think when I was early teens, that's when I went and first met Peter, because he moved down to Ashford. Then if I hadn't met Peter, he then introduced me to Etienne, who's a magician, a French magician, brilliant, who I did lots of work with for years. Etienne introduced me to Simon Drake, where I worked for 10 years at House of Magic as well. And then there I met Pat Page. And so everything kind of follows on. It's like a sliding doors moment. If I hadn't phoned up Peter and been such a hassle to him and his wife when I was a kid, that kid that was around there every single weekend or after school, then it probably wouldn't have followed that pattern. It's interesting. Doing this kind of forces you to trace back where everything comes from and where you found different things. So yeah, I mean, that feels like I'm sort of plugging him a little bit. I don't want to be too nice because, you know, like I'm an ex-employee. I don't have anything. No, I'm joking. Yeah. But no, always eternally grateful.
I think it forces you to think about tricks that, because I'm guessing different performers think differently, but I always think about it from a audience's point of view. What would an audience like to see? What would they find interesting? But this time, when you're doing this, you have to force yourself to think not only, you know, what would the audience like, but if I could only perform these 8 tricks for forever, I need to make sure that I enjoy performing them just as much as the audience enjoys seeing them.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's certain things that are definitely sort of audience pleasers on here, and I've tried to kind of give some reasons why I think they're on here, because I suppose in a weird way, when you make this list, everything has to kind of earn its place on it for a specific reason. And one thing I do find interesting, especially when you looking across different genres of magic, is some routines, lots of things have got different reasons for being there. So it's not like one specific thing. So for example, it's not 8 routines or tricks that you think they're the only tricks I'll ever do forever, or they're not just 8 tricks that you think are real crowd pleasers. They're things that are kind of got to really interest you as well. I think it's slightly diverse. I think there'll be a couple of things on here that will possibly make you go, really? Or surprise you. But, you know, I did the list, looked at what if I would change anything, tried to edit it down, came up with 10 things initially, had to carve it down to 8. So hopefully they're interesting as well, because one thing I do think, I mean, I love this podcast. I love it. I sort of came to it slightly later and then binged through everything that was available, and now I just wait every week for the next one. And it's nice actually, because there's not huge amounts of crossover in any of the ones that I've listened to. And I think that's the thing as well you think about when you put this list together, is you try and go, well, okay, if that trick's come up 2 or 3 times, that's great. You might love it, but then maybe you could find something that's slightly different to obviously keep it interesting for people listening as well. There might be a couple of crossovers here, but I've listened to so many of them, I sort of forget what's been on and what's not. But I've got lots of notes. I've just tried to decipher through them as we go.
Okay, so with that being said, that's a tease enough. Let's take you to your desert island. So if this is your first episode and you have come to this late like Chris did, then the concept is we are going to put Chris on his own desert island. When he's there, he's only allowed to take 8 tricks, 1 book, and 1 non-magic item that he uses for magic. Particulars like how big is the island, what audience is he performing to, all of that sort of good stuff. It's absolutely in Chris's imagination. It's however Chris sees it. So that doesn't really matter. It's really about the tricks that Chris couldn't live without. So that being said, let's whisk you away on 2 planes, a ferry and a little rubber dinghy to your island. And when you're there, you're going to let us know your first item. What did you take?
So the first item is a trick I've probably spent more time working on, practicing with and rehearsing with, but I've not ever performed in public. But if I was going to be stuck somewhere, I would definitely want it there, and it is a dancing cane. Now, the reason for this is I said briefly before that I kind of went through a trajectory of meeting Peter, then Etienne, then Simon Drake. And the first time I saw Simon Drake do the dancing cane live at his venue, I was completely blown away. It was nothing like I'd ever seen before. It was like it was independent of him. It was moving around with it. He could dance. It was moving. And then there's this incredible strobe effect ending. And unless you've seen it live, you can't appreciate it. It is online from the Secret Cabaret back in the 80s. But when I worked for Simon doing close-up, and then I was in the show as kind of on stage, kind of body double assistant. And I remember on my birthday once, I think it might be 19 or 20, he said to me, bring me a 3-foot piece of dowel and I'll make you a cane and you can just go away and work on it. And it's still the same one. He said he knew that I just was fascinated by it. And I think up until I started going on holiday when I had kids, there wasn't a day that went by when I didn't spend at least a couple of hours on this. Even on that Christmas day when I was living at home, I'd get up in the morning, we'd do the Christmas thing while everyone was getting ready. I'd do a couple of sessions with it. I just find you can disappear into a slightly hypnotic kind of thing of practice with it. It fascinates me. The slow cane, making it move slowly, and it's sort of trying to move independently of it. I could spend hours with it on it, and it's a really weird one because people might never perform it, live, because it's obviously heavily influenced by someone else. But yeah, he made it for me, told me to go away, practice it for 20 years and then come back. And we're not quite at 20 years yet, but it's been a long time. And if I was going to be stuck somewhere, I could very easily probably just work on that. I mean, even if I didn't have the capacity for actual music, I know enough of the different music I've rehearsed it with over the years to just, spend hours, days and days working on that. I love it. It's an incredible thing. It's like all the best magic. It's a simple concept, a simple thing, but very hard to do well, because 99.9% of routines that you see people do with the dancing cane are rubbish. And this, it is just a piece of dowel that has got a kind of sort of coating on it. I think it's like a paper, like a reflective type thing, which doesn't make it it doesn't look like a walking stick like some of the more traditional ones. But it just fascinates me. I mean, it was hugely frustrating at first, because you think, okay, you start learning some basics with it and you just realize how rubbish it looks, and it takes a long time. And I did 5-6 years of dance classes throughout my late teens, early 20s. I used to do mime classes. And then I did exactly what Simon told me at the end. I would pay the teacher a little bit extra, wait for 20 minutes and just get them to help me work on this. And it was, it's a massive part of my kind of magical kind of world. But again, something I've never done in public, might not ever do. You never know. But I love it. I couldn't, if I was going to be on a desert island, I would not be not taking that.
It's like puppetry for magicians, though, isn't it? So because it's an animation effect, you have I would say the likes of the floating table or the zombie ball sort of fall into that same bracket. it's an animation effect that's essentially being controlled by the performer, or has some sort of like root with the performer. It's being controlled by the performer, as opposed to something like a dancing hand, which may be externally animated. So trying to create that consistency of not looking like it's being controlled by the performer, again, like the floating table, when that's done really well, it just doesn't look like it's feasibly connected to anything in any way.
You're right. You are right about that. It's about approach to it as well. I mean, Simon always said that it's about the relationship you have with the cane. And if you look at sort of his approach to it, which I think is the best, is initially it's kind of like starts off with kind of isolational, kind of your standard kind of magnetism and stuck and that. And then it becomes conflict because it's like the cane gets away and it's like moving around you, and it's like, well, how do you get back to it? And then you get back to a point where it's slow and it's almost dancing with it, and then it fires off into this very fast ending. And it's interesting. I think that genre of stuff, I mean, this is slight tangent, I've got a huge collection of puppets and puppetry and ventriloquist dolls, and I'm fascinated by them. And you mentioned the floating table and the zombie ball. They're both also routines that I've worked on over the years. A Lysander table, which I think is brilliant. I've also worked with the tables where you place your hand on the top and they kind of come up, and it's all sort of illusionary mime. And the other thing that I worked on for a long time, but I've never done, is Raymond Crowe's naked zombie ball. That to me is like, it's just amazing because it's so hard to do well. And it's a zombie ball that he's got a concept with. It's not just a ball. There's no foulard. There's foulard or handkerchief with it. It's just him and a silver ball, and he's moving it, and it's all pretty much mime, and it's incredible. That to me really appeals. I suppose perhaps the reason I've never done it or got it quite right, I thought it was good enough, was because of places to do it. Because, you know, I've been a gigging sort of close-up magician for years, but I love silent magic. I think sometimes magic can be best when you just shut your mouth and do something like that can give it space. It's incredible. That stuff obviously really appeals. I think it's, like you said, it's a really good way to think about it, like puppetry in a sense, because you have to kind of give it that. If you're going to make something like a cane or a ball or a table move, float, supposedly independently of yourself, then why is it floating? What's the sort of the underlying story? What's the conclusion of it? You know, and I mean, I know with Lysander now, it's got this incredible version of his floating table where it disappears at the end. I mean, it just sort of covers it in a cloth and it vanishes. You know, what the fuck is it gone? You know, because that's always been the thing. And I used to do the floating table. I did do the floating table quite a few times, and I never knew how to finish it because I always felt like if it lands and you pull the cloth off and just show, you're sort of, what are you doing? Well done me. It's a normal table. I pinched an ending. I was only young at the time, where it would keep floating, then it would just go off into a wing and you just hear loads of crash, bang, wallop, like kind of thing, as if like the table had finally floated off, crashed into stuff, and that was it. And you just walk back out holding the cloth. I thought that felt like a good way to finish it rather than it. I don't know, apart from Lysander, I've never seen anyone sort of land a floating table particularly well. It doesn't look like relief. And I love all that kind of material in the right context. Someone doing a floating table in front of a DJ in a kind of a village hall doesn't look that great. When you see Lysander do it in like Masters of Magic in like Palace of Mystery, it totally looks like it should be there. It looks exactly where it should be. I think all that stuff's contextual, and that's probably why this kind of material, I love it, but I've never had the opportunity to really push it or do much of it because I'm never in that environment. Doing a private show in like a manor house where there's old furniture, definitely floating table, perfect, 'cause it looks like it should be there. If you sort of walk out with that at a corporate event and put it on the stage, I don't know. But there's probably people that do it beautifully. That's probably says more about me than anyone else. I'm just not quite creative enough to come up with the best way to justify it. That's the close-up, just isn't it, trying to justify all the props again. So stop it.
Maybe on your island it can be a floating tiki torch. Maybe that's what it is.
Absolutely. Well, there's a brilliant version of Simon doing the cane on a Christmas special show years ago on TV, where he starts doing it the normal way and he walks behind the tree, a Christmas tree, and he comes out and it's on fire both ends. It's like a huge sparkler. So the top of it and the bottom of it have both got they've lit it, and it's got like a sparkler, and he does the cane in it. I mean, and for people that know the routine, that has huge implications on the sort of the method, the fact there's a hot kind of fire element now going on at each end of it. And it's whisking around him like nobody's business. You just think, I asked him about it, and it's really interesting. I can only imagine how difficult and perhaps slightly stressful that might have been to do. But yeah, beautiful. So that would be my first thing, going back to the beginning. I've gone off on a tangent on other things, but floating cane.
Yeah, it's a great choice. It's one that we haven't had yet. We haven't had many stage routines, which I would put the dancing cane as a stage show. It's great. So what is your second item? What are you taking in your second position?
Needles. The needles trick is a trick that I've been fascinated with since I was about 14 or 15. And this is the trick where you put a bunch of needles in your mouth, swallow them, and swallow a load of thread, then pull the thread out, and the needles are threaded onto the thread. Peter remembered me doing this year. I think I showed it to him when I was like 15 or 16, this idea I had for it. And over the years, I've kept refining it, to find the beats in it. And there's been lots of kind of commercial versions of this trick out. But the version I do now is a version of my own. And the idea was that I wanted to be able to do it anywhere in my act and start and finish clean, but I wanted it to be the type of routine where my routine is you put a needle on your tongue, swallow it down, two more, swallow it down, a whole bunch of them, swallow them down, a whole bunch, swallow them down, string, put it all out at the end, and yeah, your mouth's completely empty at the beginning of the routine, its mouth's completely empty at the end of the routine. It's dangerous in the sense you are putting needles and stuff in your mouth, but I don't like the versions of it where you put like needles in a glass of liquid and stuff like that, because I think it's superfluous to the effect. I think probably the best version of that routine is Teller, from Penn and Teller, because there's just a vast amount of them. But then I also subscribe to the Tarbell thing. I think David Williamson mentions this actually, because he does the routine. I'm a Williamson fan, and I didn't know until his DVDs came out some years ago that he did the needles trick. That by the time you've got 6, 7, 8 needles in when you're putting them out of your mouth, that kind of is the trick kind of done. That, you know, if you've either got to go big like Teller or keep it to about a dozen or 15. And for me, this is a trick that I do perform frequently, because with the right lighting, it works well on stage because you can see them. But it's also a little bit like the type of person you get up to help you with it, is their response kind of feeds the audience as well. If people do worry it's a bit small. I know people discuss the idea of the razor blades as a bit more visible. I think razor blades in the format for that routine are something that are very alien to people. I don't think we're particularly well familiar with them in this country. That could just be a UK thing. But with needles, it was always that idea of don't put things in your mouth. And it's an interesting thing to sort of, I mean, I have performed this with a child as a helper, which is experimental, but it's quite funny because, you know, a child, it feels like you're showing them something you definitely shouldn't be showing. But it's got that notion of, do you remember when you were even younger, you know, you don't put things in your mouth. I've always found it gets a hugely good response now. I mean, it used to get a very mixed response because it can be slightly squeamish or a bit weird. It's an odd thing to do, but I think over time, if you develop more of a kind of a it's not really comedic. It's just a bit odd. But I'm not a serious performer, so my sort of demeanor doesn't make out that it's perhaps. I mean, lots of people have discussed this actually, and Tom Peterson, God rest his soul, he used to do the needles, and I remember him saying once, I'm not ever really sure what the audience think they're seeing with this trick? Do they think you're somehow doing a regurgitation kind of trick? Do they think there's a little tiny kind of minion in your stomach tying the needles on? I'm not really sure what they're supposed to think, but it's something, again, I think it came into my kind of world. I think when I was 15, Paul Zenon Trickery, he did the needles on there. And at the time I thought, maybe he's doing it like this. And I just sort of worked out a way where I was doing all the work as I thought it happened. And then years later I watched it and thought, oh no, I don't think it is that at all. But that was where it came from. And then it's written up in like Tarbell and that. But the method I've got now is really good. It's really solid and it would work. Anyone would be able to do it. You do have to put needles in your mouth, but whether you want to kind of throw them back and really push the drama of sort of swallowing is down to you. But it's got good things. Little tiny kind of, gimmick that I've worked up and made, but I love it. I mean, I do it lots. Yeah, I do it it's a good phenomenon for close up because it's a pack small play big trick. You can do it on stage, parlor, and because of the fact that you don't have to, with this method now, you could start it at any point in your act. It doesn't mean like it's got something you've got to pre-plan for. So it's something you could just get into. The only thing that you would have to do is shove the needles into like either a pincushion, but then I've normally got them sticking out of a lemon because then we'll use the lemon later for like a lemon egg walnut or something like that, So it's very dear to my heart, the needles. I've been doing it a long time. It's the first sort of public show I did. One of the fun when I was sort of more serious into magic when I was a teenager, about 15. I did it in the school show. They said, we'd like you to do some magic in the school show. I said, definitely not. I don't want to be in the school show. I don't want to come and rehearse at the weekends in the school play. I'm not an actor. They said, we'll give you a little spot. You could just do some magic. And I did this needles trick in it. And I remember people, all like the kind of the older kids. So it's the best thing ever. And some of the younger kids, it was absolutely horrendous. The parents sitting in the back going, what's he doing? Sticking these needles in his mouth. Why are they letting him do it? But yeah, brilliant. One of my favorite tricks to do. I think I'll always do that. I think that's always a main staple of my kind of stand-up work.
Yeah, it's a great trick. It's one that not many people do as well. I know Dan House has his single needle routine, which is great as well.
Yes.
Because I think
yes,
you mentioned about like the having lots of them or going for 12, but I would suspect that if you was to do a single needle in front of an audience, just that one needle, put it into your mouth, that's the first shock factor. Number 2 shock factor is swallowing it. Third shock factor would be it coming back out or regurgitating onto the string. If you showed them that, I think they would be happy. I think they would be satisfied with that. But then if you were then to do the same routine again, the exact same routine, but this time with 12 needles, which I've never seen anyone done. I've never seen anyone repeat the needles from one and then making it bigger, which I think would have a massive impact. And then swallowing 12 or 24 or whatever you want to do. Like, I think that the second time around, you would have even more impact from it, but each version would be great for any audience, if that makes sense.
Do you know what? I think that's a great idea, and I think it actually would be a lovely way to do it because you could almost bookend an act with that by doing it with one needle at the beginning and doing it with multiple at the end. And there's a lovely thing that I don't always remember to do it because it's a little bit more work, but it's incredibly effective. And it's an idea from Paul Patassi. If you haven't got his book, it's brilliant. I think he's got DVDs as well. But what's lovely about, he does the razor blades, but what's lovely about his routine is the piece of string that you swallow, he gets the person, the audience members helping to hold on to the end of it. And he takes it all into his mouth, but they never let go of it. So the string never goes completely out of sight. So he gets to about, I think there's a 3 or 4 inches still sticking out, and his sort of face obviously right near their hand. And then he starts to pull back again. So it appears like the string is coming straight back out again. But this time it then comes out with the needles on it. It's a really, really clever subtlety that
sounds great.
Wouldn't be applauded by an audience. But my God, when you see it as a magician kind of fooler, if you don't know that and know how he gets around it, which is massively simple, it's a brilliant idea. it's one of those ones that has to come with a warning, doesn't it? You know, there's routine saying, we're going to teach you this, but don't do it.
Yeah. So that takes us
Teach
on to
Harry how to do
your
it.
yeah, he can be collateral damage. Teach Harry, and then
I dropped him on his head when he was a kid. It doesn't matter, you know. I think a bit more won't hurt him.
Right, so that brings us on to your third item. What's in your third position?
So we're going much more kind of mainstream now, and this is something. It's one of my favorite close-up tricks, and it is ring flight. I know it's probably come up before, and it will probably come up again, but this trick has probably got me more gigs over the years than any other, specifically at things like wedding fairs. So I think if you're at a wedding fair and a potential couple come round and you borrow the engagement ring, or if you can, even better, borrow it off of the mother of the bride or groom, vanish their ring, appears in your keys, they're definitely booking you. It's the trick that when my wife first saw me at a wedding fair, she wasn't there as a punter, she had a stand, she wasn't like walking around as a potential bride. It's the trick that she always remembers. It's a favourite, and I still use a key case for it. Back when I first started doing this, there was two versions. There was the Immaculate Ring Flight, which is brilliant, which we sold in the shop, and there's Rinky Dinky from Hot Tricks, which is one of the best names of a trick ever. And then Peter, like he always did and still does back then, even more so back then, found a company, El Duco, who just did this amazing version of it. And Pete was always very known back in the day as being able to get stuff in that wasn't readily available in this country. This is sort of the very early days of the internet. So, you know, this stuff he would get in and you couldn't get it anywhere else. And he got one in for himself. I said, I definitely would love that. And it was a fortune. And I remember buying one off him, and I've used it ever since. We cut all the clips out. I cut all the clips out of it apart from the two either side of the clip that the ring appears on, because I believe when you hold it up at a table, if there's a key either side of it, it just frames the ring better. And like lots of magicians in the last 15 or so years, I have refitted it into a design key case. So just no one ever brought up the fact that it was just a black leather key case. But I think my wife likes designer gear. She said, oh, this would look good if it appeared in one of these baton key cases. She bought me one for Christmas, thinking that if she just bought me the key case, I would still be able to do the trick. So I don't know, she realized there was some kind of like, you know, gimmick element to it. So I refitted it into that, but I've always done it in a key case. I used to carry a Rinky Dinky on my keys. This is before that, what's that lovely one that Dave Bonzo makes? Ring Flight Revolution. Mm-hmm. This is before that came out. So I used to have a Rinky Dinky on my keys, and I would do it sort of casually. This is 18 or 19. I do it in sort of nightclubs, but I would want to put the keys in their hands beforehand. So I would sort of vanish the ring, but I have to hold onto my keys. So the ring would appear in the keys in their hands after that, you know, so they'd have it before they supposedly knew it vanished. The only reason I'd still do it in a key case is because I think if you do borrow a ring, expensive ring, I quite like the idea of it being in something that looks like an expensive key case. It means you've given value and care to the ring. I always worry that idea that if it's kind of if you bring out your bunch of keys and it's sort of smashing around against your car keys, and that perhaps there's that's probably me overthinking it, because I think more people use Ring Flight Revolution than they do a key case, but it's probably more down to the fact that I've just always used the key case, and I'm a bit of a creature of habit, you know. Once you've used something for such a long time, you can't. I don't want to change it, but it's just one of those tricks that it's a quick, it's a go-to trick if you're at any kind of event and a waitress or someone comes up or some sort of show us a quick trick. It's just a very strong routine. I don't do the whole thing with going into an envelope and that all the time. I have done, but I think just it appearing on the keys, taking off the keys, giving them back the keys, and put the key case away. It's really powerful. I think it's a go-to trick, and I've used it, everywhere. I've used it on stage as well. I have used it a lot. I experiment quite a lot, and I'm still not there with the routine I want to do with linking finger rings, and I've got lots of different kind of versions of it that I play around with over the years, and it's a very good intro to that, to borrow a ring, vanish it, and that. And I think it's in Nick Einhorn's lecture notes. He has a routine where he does a ring flight first, and then goes into more in a parlor setting, then goes into a kind of a borrowing other rings and linking them. But it's one of my favorite things. It's just amazing. I know some magicians shy away from it, and for a while I used to do interlace instead. Richard Sanders, my nan, to make it up for me in my suit at the time. But it just gets such a good reaction. I think it's hard to beat as a good commercial close-up trick. I really do. And like I said, people listening will know that the El Duco version Ring Flight Revolution is a certain method. There are other methods. Pro Flight, I think there's one, and there's lots of other ones where it's done in a slightly different way. So Lovely Gate and Bloom has a lovely one, and a pouch, which is brilliant. James Brown used to do that really well. But yeah, I've always done this one. Absolutely love it. Couldn't be without it.
Great. It's one that we've had many times before, and we will nearly definitely have many times in the future. But it's a great choice anyway. And it brings us on to your halfway point. What is in your fourth position?
This is a prop. So you might try and pin me for a certain thing, but it is the Mind Spy, the original Mind Spy. And this is not in here because I've been told to mention it or have to mention it or feel obliged to. The Mind Spy, Peter's peak wallet, is moment I go back to over and over again in my head as a time when I was standing at one side of a counter opposite a magician in a magic studio and just thinking, look, there's lots of incredible peak wallets out there, and there's lots of utility wallets that do lots of different things. In close-up we all use things like JOL wallets and that, but the Mind Spy, it's the one time I can remember really feeling like proper layman kind of feeling of like, what was that? What was that? And I think I must have been about 14 when I saw it. And it was Peter did the routine on me. He had a prototype. And I can still remember the film that I wrote down. And he did the Hollywood or Bust routine on me with it. I had absolutely no idea what was going on. It just sort of floored me. And it's a prop item that is always in my case. It has saved me on many occasions when someone said, could you just get up and do something at the end? You can use this on the stage and that, because for me, I still like the fact that it's inside jacket pocket wallet. I can pull it out, do what I need to do. But the Hollywood or Bust routine that Peter did on me back in it must have been 2000, 2001. It can't have been much long after that. And he maintains, I will use this to correct something, because he maintains, so I wrote down the film, I thought of Keanu Reeves, and it was just at the time The Matrix had come out. Now, at this time, I had a shaved head, right? And so he did the whole thing on me, the balance thing of the letter X, and I was like, what the fuck is going on here? This guy, he maintains I was wearing a full-length leather jacket in this, because I didn't own a full-length leather jacket until a couple of years later, but I did have a suit-style three-quarter length leather jacket because I was and still am a Paul Zenon geek, and Paul Zenon started wearing a leather jacket, and I had found this leather jacket. But I think, to Peter's credit, I was standing the other side of the counter. The jacket was just below my waist, so he probably just thinks it went all the way to the floor. It didn't. But his point is, he probably didn't even need to use it. He used the wallet because I was wearing a full-length leather jacket. I had a shaved head, and I thought of the tricks. It couldn't have been more obvious. But my gosh, that prop is so good. I mean, I used to use it for chronologue because it has other features in it that allow you to do various different things. There was so much with it. And I just remember that moment of feeling, and I've been into magic quite a while then. I was very into sleight of hand and technical stuff. I didn't know much about mentalism. I didn't know anything. And he did this, and I felt proper like gut punch, like what the fuck? It's just how does he know that? I phoned him every day from school. This is back when it was Vodafone pay-as-you-talk phones, and you top them up. So we're talking like very early 2000s or late 90s, every day to find out when that was coming out. And I think he got so irritated with me in the end. Probably more Jenny got peed off than anyone. I was trying to, is that out yet? Is that out yet? Is that out yet? And it came out, and I think it was like £49.50 at the time when it came out, which was like huge. It felt like such a lot of money, but my God, I got it. I literally felt like a superhero when I had that. I read the instructions from bit to bit. I set up everything, but the indexing in it, it's still something I use. It's, for me, it works really well because you can use it in stand up on stage because it's got the pad element in it. And it just floors me. I used to watch him do it in the shop at conventions. And even if you have magicians come in that knew the methodology, they missed it every single time. It was just like, I love it. I think it's an incredible thing. I'm definitely buying that new one because I just like the fact that it's called the Baker Street version as well. It's that lovely brown colour. But my bonet's in the bottom of my bag, which is down to the left of me here. I can see it in there. Yeah, it's just a brilliant, brilliant prop. And if I had to be pushed for a routine, I've done Hollywood or Bust with it quite a lot, but I'm not as good at films as others, so I've always got them to write down the film rather than the actor because I can try and decipher the film. But again, because of the way it works, it's the way the peak sort of element happens is so justified that you can pretty much get into anything, even if it's sort of a specific word or something. It's just it's brilliant. I love it.
I was going to be devil's advocate then, but you saved yourself by giving me a routine.
I tried to, I tried to.
I think Pete says as well his favourite routine with it was Hollywood or Bust, but because celebrities and films and stuff change so regularly, it becomes a little bit more of a challenge, but it is a phenomenal routine, Hollywood and Bust. And that brings us over your halfway point now, so number 5, what's in your 5th position?
Number 5 is going to my kind of 20-odd years as a gigging magician, and it's probably the trick that I've done most. I used to do it every table for a long, long time, and it is Bill in Kiwi. This came along. Carl Cloutier was the first person to kind of really push this idea. And then some years later, I'd say one of the sort of the fathers of modern commercial close-up magic, without really wanting to be it, Martin Sanderson, put his routine on his DVD, and everyone was doing it, and it's a really, really strong trick. I don't know how many times I've done it. I mean, I used to, back in my early 20s, I had 2 or 3 residencies a month, and we'd have like 20 or 30 tables a night. So I was turning up with a lot of Kiwis. It's a lot of work to do because it is a bit messy. It's pocket space and things like that to carry bits around. And over the years, I've probably pushed it as far as I can go in terms of the methods. I used to do a fairly standard thing and produce it at the beginning of the routine out of a cup and ball routine, the routine that Pat Page taught me years ago. I've done it in a bag and that, and I'd sort of start with producing it, do the note kind of vanish, and it would reappear at the end. I just really think it's one of those routines that it is worth the effort if you can be bothered to do it. There is the argument that perhaps doing it every table, if there's 15 tables at something like a wedding, perhaps it's overkill. But what about if these people are only going to see you once? You've got 8-10 minutes of their table max, hit them with stuff that's really hard. I'll say that, but I have, in the last few years, done it less. So I haven't always done it every table because I sort of worked up a routine of mine with like a note. It appeared inside the lid of a pen, either a Sharpie or a Sherp, and it's my own handling. Again, it'll probably appear on the Unlimited at some point because it's a nice little commercial trick, because what I found was it was getting the same response but without the mess or without any kind of reset. But I just think I think if I had to kind of look back over certainly my sort of 20s and that and very early 30s, this was kind of the trick that people were kind of rebooking off the back of. This was the one that kind of did it. And there was some lovely sort of psychological moments, because when this became popular, I was working the shop, and Pete and I would come up with ideas for it. And I've got a couple of lines in there that make them think afterwards that they've done the cutting open and taken it out. There's a very good tip of doing a kind of a little something and leaving something behind at a gig, or leaving at a couple of tables, which is Nigel Mead's, where you leave behind a kiwi that's been cut in half that the note came out of, that kind of throws them off. If someone, oh, could you just throw that in the bin for me, and giving them something, they're going, and then looking at it going, well, hang on a second, what no, how did this work? I think it's just such a good trick. And there's been times when I think by doing that at tables, then it kind of throws off what could be like, there's a big trend to sort of doing like a finale trick at close up now, and something like a bin and lemon or something like that is a very good finale trick to do for the whole room. So if you've done this around the tables, you've kind of killed yourself on that, so you've got to come up with something else. But it's just it was requested a lot. I used to do it in the restaurants. It was very, very, very it gets a huge reaction, but it is one of those ones that's a lot of work. And I suppose the biggest struggle with it is, as trends have changed in fashion and suits have become more closely fitted, and that we wear different styles of suits now, to have too much in your pockets is a little bit more challenging, hence the thing with the pen. And the main reason I kind of dropped it at some corporate stuff is because of the mess. Like, it is messy. You take the note out and it's messy. It appearing in the lid of a pen means it's clean, it's neat, it's just still a built to impossible location, which is essentially what this is. But there's just something about it that people always remember. It's always that the kiwi trick. And it was my closing thing at tables. It was that I used to open with a cup of the ball, produce the kiwi, do my other bits like ring fights and card stuff. I would do bottle to table, and then that would supposedly be the finale. And then it would always be like, oh, where's the note? And it was like, oh yeah. And then it was kind of like the callback, and then I'll lift up the cup and there's the kiwis there still, but cut it open inside the note. And it's a really solid trick. It is messy, it is work, but as far as reactions go, it's a bit of a no-brainer. I mean, I've got a whole routine around it, and something else I'm going to come on to, it forms part of it. So I'll call back in a classic kind of close-up way to this routine, but billing kiwi, absolutely.
Great choice. It's one again that we haven't had a huge amount of, which is a surprise. Certainly not in kiwi, which I would argue is maybe not as performed nowadays. It's normally to a lemon or an orange, or a walnut inside a lemon, inside a, I don't know, apricot. I don't know. It's normally inside a thing, inside a thing, inside a thing, inside a thing.
Hello guys, I'm here to talk to you about Alakazam Unlimited. This is the best streaming platform in the world, I'm telling you now. With Alakazam Unlimited, you get access to over 150 magic routines. This is video performances and explanations. We have card magic, coin magic, kids magic, rope magic, mentalism, stage, parlor, impromptu. We've got you covered. All of this for the low price of just £4.99 a month, and you can cancel at any time. Perfect if you've got commitment issues. Yes, I'm talking to you. Guys, you are going to absolutely love it. If you haven't joined the platform already, what the heck are you doing? Alakazam Unlimited is a streaming platform that you need to be a part of. Not only that, there is also exclusive content only available on the platform. Check it out now, alakazam.co.uk. Cheers.
So yeah, really good choice, and I'm interested now to hear what that callback's going to be. Take us to your sixth position. What's in your sixth place?
All right, so this is something that you're definitely going to call me out on, and it would be a deck of cards. Cards are a massive part of my kind of world. I've always got cards. I've had to push them further across the desk so I don't annoy you by keep constantly fiddling and shuffling with them throughout this conversation. But card magic, you know, some people get really attracted to certain types of magic, coins, things like that. Cards, to me, is just, it fascinates me. And I think it's probably because there's such diversity in what you can do, but sleight of hand with cards, to me, feels like the ultimate kind of test of kind of skill. I mean, I remember being really drawn to people like Mike Vincent, Guy Hollingworth when I was younger, because there was a program, Eras of Magic, that was on telly, and they were on it as talking heads, and they would build a sleight of hand artist. I went, I want to be that kind of guy, and that's really technical. Hard stuff, a deck of cards, I mean, it's endless stuff you can do with it, but I have made some notes because I think a deck of cards feels like a cop-out as an idea. So
yes, it is.
I've got two tricks that I've tried to nail it down with. Three, I've tried to put it down to it, and I will come to one. But I love technical sleight of hand card magic, and Phoenix Aces is a really important routine for me, because it feels like people always give me stuff on my birthday, like the cane. But when I was, I think it was my 16th or 17th birthday, I was working for Peter. Card Stunts, the video by Greg Wilson, had just come out. And lots of people were saying, oh, this is brilliant. It's great to watch. It's really hard. Peter said, it was my birthday. I was there working the shop, packing the orders. He said, well, have this, you know, if you want to have it. And I think he gave me that and like double take. There was quite a few. And I went home, watched this and went, wow, learned everything from it. And that's what I did. Phoenix Ace was my opening trick when I did the YMC close-up competition. And then I did it again in the actual close-up competition, the Magic Circle one. Sorry, not the actual, the adult one, a couple of months ago, whenever that was. And did it again, but with a twist on it with the different colours and that backs. And it, to me, it's just one of those routines. It just feels like it's really magical, because you're sort of plucking the aces out of the air. And it's not particularly commercial, because producing aces are kind of a, you know, if I'm working in a gig environment, but I've done it with 4 selections quite a few times, had 4 people like kind of stop on different cards and pulled them at the end, pulled them off of people and that. And then in the Magic Circle competition this time, I did a sort of a variation, which is I think it's a Richard Kaufman idea from the book Card Magic, which again I think Peter had as one of his own, and I borrowed, and I think I might have not given it back, you know. But it was a lovely thing called Aces of the Phoenix of a different colour, and it was, you did the Phoenix Aces, then at the end the backs all changed colour, which kind of spurred, that was kind of the starting point for that whole thing. But I love that as a routine with cards, because it's sort of technical, a bit flourishy. If I had to pick a card routine I would do over and over, it's really hard. I came down to like a kind of a cards to pocket routine, a bit like I did in the competition, that cards to pocket with the ambitious and the colour change, it uses all that, the doubles. But I think probably for me, the Torn and Restored Transposition by David Williamson is one of the best card tricks I think there is. I first saw it on an international lecture video. It was a Williamson close-up international lecture, and I think Peter got it because he used to get quite a lot of the international tapes at the time just for himself and watch them and that. And I'm pretty sure he got it and lent it to me. And it was Noel Coulter that used to phone the shop all the time, said, oh, you should watch the Williamson tape. It's really good. And this is pre-Williamson being kind of, it wasn't doing like the raccoon on this. He was kind of very young, and it was all very serious and kind of, you know, this is before he would kind of jump around and like what we know as today. But we're watching that and just being floored by it. And then I think a couple of years after it's in that, I think David Blaine did it on one of his specials in the Magic Man special. He did it to Tyra Banks in the street. His own version of it. He didn't do the spin out and all that. But Torn and Restored Transposition is a really, really good card routine. And if anyone, I assume most people will know it, but the reason I love it is really hard to put into words. And the best thing I could say is go and watch. It sounds like I shouldn't mention other magic shops on it, but he did a Penguin lecture. And at the beginning of this lecture, he does this routine and he explains it. And it takes him about 40 odd minutes to do and explain it, because there's so many points in how he explains it that I think are so applicable to card magic in the terms of what the audience thinks, what they want to happen, motivation, the beats and points. And it's just amazing. And I do stand by that extra little bit of effort at the end when the card's restored and then the wrinkles come out of it. That wrinkle, getting the wrinkles out of it is 100% worth doing, that peripheral little effect where, you know, you get the cards then shuffled and then you just roll it and the wrinkles are gone. It's great. And if I was to sort of back reference, I know people haven't seen it, but my Magic Circle routine this time, I did the Phoenix Aces and I used one of the aces as a signed card, and then that ended up changing colour as well with the colour changing deck at the end. I've done a few sort of commercial close-up shows, and rather than the Phoenix Aces, because it's not always congruent with the environment, I've done tournaments or transposition, which if you know the method, then you'll know that if you then want to go into a color changing card sequence, you are kind of set up to be able to kind of know what card they're gonna kind of sign. It's just my favorite. It gets a huge response. It's got all the different elements in it, but it's got a lot of elements in it that can be done very naffly, like finding the wrong card. Oh, is it the right card? Oh, has it changed? And unless you really kind of do it a lot, I suppose that it's really hard to put into words what people's response is to it, because there's so much magic in a short period of time. A card is a transposition in it, obviously with the transposition, but it's torn. So how could that swap places with that? Then it goes back together, but it's kind of pre-thinking what they're going to say. Well, because you almost have to hold back and they go, put it back together and be prepared for the fact that the card then goes back together. If I'm put on the spot to do a trick out and about with like kind of, if I'm at gigs or show us a card trick, it's almost always that. Because it just hits people in a way that's not what it's not just a standard pick a card, I'll find it. The cards sort of seem to go on like this whole journey of kind of changing from one to the other and not being found, then being torn up, going back together, and then all the wrinkles come out and people are like, meh. By the end of it, it's almost too much for people. It's brilliant. I love it.
Great trick, but I do think that we're going to have to allow you, and I've never done this before, a weekly shipment of cards to your island for that, because I think you're going to need more than one deck. So yeah,
absolutely.
A little rubber dinghy's going to come to you every week with a little brick of cards.
3 decks at a time. That's it. Barrow them together, and you're there.
So that takes us to your tail end. The tail end of your list.
Yes.
The last 2 tricks. I'm guessing at this point you were pulling out your hair. So what's in your 7th position?
Okay, so the 7th position started off as a utility type item, but actually is something that I use in the Bill and Kiwi as a part of the method. So it's the best way to describe it, I suppose, in this form is a changing banknote, a changing banknote using a prop that all magicians own. We all use it, often to vanish a silk, but a bill change.
That gets a thumbs up
$100 bill
from
change,
me.
I think it was called.
That gets a thumbs
Absolutely,
up from
there
me.
we go. He's skirting around it. But specifically, not just the idea of changing one denomination to another. It's a routine that I think is Etienne's idea, Etienne Pradier's idea, and it's called Bureau de Change. This is where it's a note that's called for that is a different currency. So the reason I love this and what I think is so good about this is I believe that it's on a very similar path to any drink called for that magicians do on stage. Now, any drink called for, or the magic kettle, or whatever you like it to be, is a routine where people call out drinks supposedly at random and the kettle pours out the drink. I feel like this is the same thing of it, but in close up. You can borrow the way I did it with the Kiwi trick is I borrow a $5, change it into something they call for, often a 50. I know some people change down, change up, split the money and that, and then change it back here and have it signed. And I would ask them, are you going on holiday anytime soon? Are you going away anywhere soon? And they might say, oh yeah, I'm going here, I'm going here, I'm going here. Or you detect an accent from someone at the table. Someone's from Australia, or it might be. If you then change that note into the currency of where they're going on holiday, a currency they've named, or the country they're from, it's incredibly strong. It's almost strong if you don't specifically ask for name any currency in the same way you would do in any drink call for. But I've done this thousands and thousands of times, and it has that same feeling as what I imagine people must feel when they shout out, I want a whiskey, and you pour a whiskey out of the magic kettle trick. This is the same routine, but for close up. And it just has something about it that's sort of a little bit inexplicable for people. Of course, there's going to be an element where they question method, and is he just, is this guy like a travel agent walking around? But having done it so many times and seen the response of it, it's just incredible, especially if you've got a couple of kind of variations where, someone calls for $20 and you ask if they want it in one or two notes, and it could be two tens or a 20, and that it's a really powerful thing, because it feels like, because of the timing of it and because of the fluidity of the method, it looks like it's happening in real time. And I mean, if people have seen Etienne lecture or work live, you'll see, like, the pinnacle of it. And lucky enough to have been there at the early stages when it was just, I think it was just your sort of euros or US dollars or something. But over time now, he's developed this gimmick that you get, which kind of allows you to have quite a few, currencies, to hand to make this work. And it's amazing. You definitely see trends at the moment. You see quite a lot of kind of younger people, and it's always Dubai, dirhams, and some people you can just kind of get a feel what it might go for. But I feel like, so my callback is I would borrow the note back, have it signed after having changed from like a higher currency. Say you borrowed a fiver, and they say, I'm going to South Africa, or whatever it is. And you also could do that, what is that? Is that Rand? Boom, change the sign note to Rand, put it on the table, bang, done. And that was always my way of vanishing the note for the bill in Kiwi. I throw that sort of lesser currency down, and lesser in value, and that would be it. And I'd crack on with the next thing. And then at the end, I'd pick it up. I said, oh, yeah, the note, and then go to fold it back up, put it in my pocket, boom, into the ending of the Kiwi. And it was a really efficient way to do it. It's very, very magical. The biggest thing with it is not to do it too much. You don't want 4 or 5 people around the table shouting out different currencies and just going for it just because you can, because it kills it. Actually, the best usage of it, which happens more often than not. I mean, if people do it, they'll know this. You'll be at a table, you go, can I borrow like £5 from someone? And there'll be some guy that sidles out with some like Polish zloty or, something. You just borrow that and carry on with the routine as normal. So if someone hands you going, oh yeah, a Canadian dollar, get them to sign it straight away, change it to a different, change it up, but it's changed up in Canadian. You don't reference the fact it's a different currency, just crack straight on, it's changed, and then go straight to the Kiwi ending later. That's probably where it's strongest, because it feels like it could have been any note. So, for example, if you were at a gig and someone handed you a $10 bill, and you say, oh, yeah, just sign that for me, that's great, I said, without kind of flinching, and yes, and change it, change down to a 1. Oh, there we go, it's a 1. And they go, their brain just goes, because they go, well, hang on a second, no, he asked for £5, well, I gave him a different currency, but it still worked, and I don't understand that. There's so many permutations to it. It's a really good trick. Again, I suppose there's a pattern here, isn't there? It's a little bit of work to get it kind of, to get yourself well versed with it, and the speed and the kind of the timing and that, but it's really well worth it. It is a blockbuster trick. It is the close-up version of any drink called for. And I mean, the utility gimmick itself, I mean, I could use for other things on the island. I could be doing salt tricks, vanishing any kind of lonesome handkerchiefs that might be hanging around and that. But if I had to pick one thing to do with it, it would be that bureau de change, that multiple currency thing. Brilliant.
Great. And it makes absolute sense, but I've never heard it compared to any drink called for, but as a close-up version, which is absolutely true.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, if you think about it, if you think about you standing at a table and you've got nothing in your hands, you borrowed a note and just say, name any currency. But it's a lovely idea. I can't remember whose idea it was. I want to say it was Paul Fowler. Paul Fowler? Is it Paul Fowler? It does that card in the sock trick.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure it might have been him that mentioned to me many years ago. He says, I don't ask for any currency because that makes them kind of think of it as a challenge. He said, I asked them, are you going on holiday this year? Or if you could go on holiday, you taking her away this year, you getting married, where you going on honeymoon at a wedding. I want to give that credit because I'm pretty sure that was his idea that told me that. And it's a really good idea. If you're worried about saying, name any currency, it's like, are you going on holiday this year? Oh, yes, we're going to Thailand for the first time. Oh, really? And then you're kind of straight into, whereabouts is Thailand? But it's, sign it, write Thailand on it and on the 5 and change it to like Thai baht. People would just go, what? So have a great time in Thailand, and you sort of walk away. They're going, hang on a second. But it's amazing. It is that same thing. And no, you don't need to. It's something you can do in real time on the fly as well. I think if you buy the routine of him, it gives you that kind of the top things that that might come up. But you get to know over time what there is. It's phenomenal, really phenomenal. I hope actually no one else does it because it's a really good routine. I don't want to be too enthused. Actually, it's rubbish. This is a terrible, terrible routine that no one should do. Don't waste your time. It's embarrassing going to the counter in Sainsbury's saying, I want one note from this, one note from this. Oh, yes, my daughter's doing a project at school. We just need lots of different notes. It's awkward.
I like the idea of that mixed with any drink called for from the note. So you go, oh, where you go in Thailand, or
look at this,
Greece. What is their like drink? And then you fold it into a tube and pour it out into a glass, and it's their local drink. That would be excellent. Good luck trying to find a method for that.
I think you just want me to not sleep tonight. Although I tell you what, though, I mean, Etienne years ago, I speak to you about this. He had this amazing. He came to the shop and said, "I've got a great idea for a routine in that," and it was like a machine that he said there's a machine that you feed a card into in your pocket, and it folds the card and inserts it into a cigarette. And Peter said to him, "That sounds brilliant." I said, "I don't know how to do it. Could you make a machine?" They had no specification for the machine or how the machine would work. It was just this idea. But if anyone could do something with a drink coming out of it, it'll be him because he's crazy.
So on our tail end, we're on our last item now. So this is number 8. What's in your final position?
So this was a bit of a throw up between a couple of things, but it's something that I've only performed a couple of times. It's still a work in progress, but the thing I'm most excited about, I think like all magicians, is the thing you're working on at the moment. And this is a version of the magic square that I've been working on for a long time, but specifically a routine by Harry Anderson called The Brain Shows Off, which is incredible. If you've ever seen him do it, I mean, he's no longer with us, sadly, but this was a routine where he would frame it as he had a book that he bought out, which is really hard to get. I've got one here somewhere, which is kind of a book where you pick the last trick of the show. And I think if people want to go down this route, Stage by Stage by John Graham, he has a sort of a simplified version, but what I love about this is it's a kind of a memorized deck thing, but then as you're kind of supposedly memorizing the cards, you're writing all these different numbers down, and the trick that was numbered in the book happens to be the number that the magic square adds up to. But what I like about it is it's a bit of a head fuck because there's so much going on. It's this memorized deck, include plus the magic square. And I like Magic Square, but I always think there's something about it that's a little bit odd for an audience to watch. What I liked about Harry Anderson's version is he does it on, I don't know if you've ever seen it, he does it on a folded piece of paper. So he's kind of folding and unfolding the paper and writing only one number at a time. So when he reveals the magic square thing, he unfolds it so you can see a strip of 4 numbers across or away, and then unfolds the full thing at the end. But what appeals to me about it is it's got sort of multiple layers. So I can't actually memorize a deck of cards. I find the idea, so it uses a sort of a deck memorization, which I find impossible. But the way I've done it in the past, I've sort of tied it in with Bob Cassidy's deck memory, which I used to close my little stand-up thing with a lot a few years ago, and I really like Cassidy's deck memory. But the idea of sort of combining it with the Magic Square presentation of Harry Anderson's, it really appeals to me. And I think it's, again, I suppose it's a routine that I'm working on. It's not polished, but if I was going to be stuck on an island and be forced to work on something, it would be this to get it refined. The biggest difficulty with it, like any mentalism, is to make it not too Derren Brown-esque, which I think is something a lot of modern performers must struggle with, because anytime you think of anything kind of mentalism or with kind of this mathematical element or this process and that to it, it's really hard not to do it in a way that feels like Derren's done. But yeah, the routine itself, I think, again, I keep referencing it, I think he does it on I think I saw it on the Penguin lecture some years ago. He did a lecture in London at International quite a few years ago, and you got the lecture note, he had the lecture notes for it. But The Brain Shows Off, and to me, it's not supposedly, I don't suppose it's really a magic trick, is it? It's not really mentalism, but it goes back to this idea of one of the first sort of mentalism tapes I got that Peter gave my mum to give me as a critic, suggested to her when I was like 15 at Christmas, was Bob Cassidy's Mental Miracles. And he closed with the mem deck, and he said this sort of gives credibility to everything he's done beforehand. It kind of looked like he was just demonstrating a kind of a technique that he had with this sort of deck memorization. And that always really appealed to me. And I thought the magic square idea, combined with this, you're sort of combining the numbers you're writing down must have something to do with the way you're trying to memorize the cards in the deck, and that kind of got justified one to the other. And it's not there yet. It's still a work in progress, but I've done it a couple of times. It's been pretty good. Like any routine, it's got a few wrinkles to iron out, namely because in the Anderson routine, he has a card taken out of the deck that he memorizes, and he somehow manages, I can't remember what his method was, that a spectator in the audience is the one that names the card that's missing. It turns out to be correct, and he takes out the number and it is. And I've kind of been working on that element, with a slightly different method that's a bit more sort of infallible, but it's just a really good trick. A magic square is, again, one of those routines that can be really, really bad, and really boring or overly complicated. But I think at its height, it can be very entertaining. I mean, notably, John Archer's routine is excellent. Graham Jolly, Jeffrey Durham had a really good routine. So they're all good. But this appeals to me, I think, because it's a bit complicated and a bit weird and a bit unusual, and it's a bit unexpected. And I'm just always trying to look for an ending that to a sort of a stand-up act that's a bit different than no one else is doing. And the more I look into this routine and work on it, the more I realise why people aren't doing it, because it's really hard to sort of do it without it becoming too complicated. But it's about stripping away. But that's for the Mike routine. I mean, it was a toss-up between that and a sort of a standard close-up routine. But I think that feels like a more interesting thing to throw out there that, might be of interest.
There are some really, really good
you love it.
magic square routines. I know Phil Smith has a really nice one using this notepad, but I think it's square numbers or something like that, which you have as like an added kicker almost in there. So there are lots of really good versions, but I know Harry Anderson was, when I was growing up, Harry Anderson was phenomenal.
He's got amazing stuff, Harry Anderson. He's one of those people, a lot of people obviously know him for Needle Through Arm, which is, brilliant. But the Magic Square, if you've seen it, there's some lecture notes you can track them down called The Wise Guy Show, which is the show that he used to close with it when he had his kind of residency doing this show, and he used to finish with this, and it's got the full scripting of how he did it, and it was amazing. And he'd be, calling off the cards in the memory and writing down all these numbers and that, and it was kind of at the end he'd get to this thing where he had to fold it up. It's a massive A1 piece of paper, but you could only ever see one number at a time on it, so he was folding it and unfolding it. But the idea sort of was that when he sort of unfolded it, he'd unfold 4 numbers at a time, so it would either be horizontal or vertical, and add them all up and show that it added up to the numbers. So I suppose to put it really kind of clearly, the routine is or was a book. You say that you're going to pick the last trick in the show, flick through the book, stop on a number, stop on a trick, what trick do you like? That would remember what the number of the trick is. So he would know what the number was going to be. So all the tricks were numbered like 1 to 52 or whatever it may be, or 1 to 100. And the number of the trick that they selected, which happened to be card memory, would then be the number that worked out to be the number on the magic square. But I think if someone wants it's a very complicated routine. But if someone wants to go and look up kind of a version of it that's been thought of and was taught to with Harry's blessing, stage by stage, which I think you sell in the shop, the book, I think that's where I got it from, by John Graham. He's got a routine in there, and he's simplified it down. It's 5 cards that are memorized in it. And he still does the magic square element. He's made the paper a little bit smaller, a little bit easier to do. He's really thought about it and made it practical. So that was my kind of starting point. And I should probably just look at what the routine is called, because that would probably be better than me sort of rambling all the Square Deal. It's called Square Deal. So if that's probably if I wanted to sort of refine this down to a sort of a modern version, someone go and look up Square Deal, page 231, stage by stage. Brilliant.
Great. And again, another wacky one. So we've gone from the dancing cane to the magic square at either end of your list.
Absolutely.
We've got a kiwi thrown in halfway through. We've got a round the world banknote changing. And just to top off, we've got a sprinkling of needles. So that's a great list. Very, very good. But that brings us on to your book. So what did you choose as your book?
I chose The Expert at the Card Table by S.W. Erdnase for a number of reasons. One, I think if I was going to be trapped on a desert island, I could be forced to learn everything in it, and I could come back and hang out with the cool gambling kids at the conventions by being able to do everything in it. But two, I just love the mystery of this as well. I love the mystery of who wrote it. I think it's really enigmatic and appealing. I think it's enticing. Like, was it this guy who wrote it? Why did he write it? And why was it kind of a pseudonym? What actually was his real name? Was he a gambler? It's also got something in it, a kind of an undertone in it. I mean, it's got gambling moves, obviously, and it's got, magic in it, and there's the Jardin Man section. But what appeals to me about this book is this is where this kind of initial notion, which has now become like the Vernon touch, and that it's about hiding a skill and not being too. I mean, there's some amazing moves in it, and there's moves that we all love, like some of the Erdnase shifts, which are wildly, perhaps impractical all the time. But I think with card magic specifically, it's about sort of, I mean, when I started, I mentioned earlier Phoenix Aces, which is probably one of the flashiest kind of close-up tricks you could do with cards, it's a great competition piece, but because it sort of shows skill and that kind of thing. But what I love about the Expert at the Card Table is it's about hiding the skill, and it's about this kind of card work and card sleight of hand in an arena where you don't want to be flashy. It's got to look natural, and it's only a small book. There are people far more knowledgeable and better than me that have spent a lifetime studying it. And I think if I was going to be chucked on a desert island, I think you could very well easily spend a lifetime studying it. So when you got tired from practicing the dancing cane, you could sit down with a deck of cards and work on moves from Erdnase. I just think it's just so appealing as well, the mystery of it as well. No one really knows who wrote it. I think that as a kind of a magic, although it's magic and gambling book, I think is just perfect, because it's sort of, it's a bit mysterious. We're not really sure, and we probably never will know. I mean, there's a couple of really good documentaries. There's one on YouTube, and there's the one on Apple TV where Paul Wilson specifically says, I actually don't want to know who wrote it. I think that the mystery is more enticing than actually finding out the truth. So yes, it would be that, but mainly probably because I'd like to just spend 50 years learning everything from it and come and hang out and be like, do you know that thing from Erdnase? We go, yes, I do, because I've just been working on it for 50 years on my own on a desert island.
We'll have loads of people saying it, I'm sure, but we haven't had anyone say it yet, I don't think.
Well, it's very niche. It's very specific because it's specifically card stuff. It's not magic. It's a lot of gambling stuff in it. There's a lot of stuff in it. There's a lot of stuff in it I'd love to be better at and better with and more well versed with. But I think it's a book that you could very well spend a lifetime on and still only kind of get half good with it. Yeah, I mean, there was a big debate on the book thing for me. There was a number of different ones. There was a couple that had come up a couple of times before, but I chose this, for all those reasons.
And it's a great choice as well. And like you said, the story behind it, I think, I've seen people write shows based on the concept behind the book. And that brings us to your curveball item. Your curveball item is something which is non-inherently magical, but you use for magical purposes. So what would you take as your curveball?
I find this really difficult. This was probably the most difficult question because I think I don't use it for magical purposes, but I'd like to do something with it in my act. I would probably take a ventriloquist doll, because I've got a lot of them. It was my first interest, and I was very, very young. I realised it was very difficult to become ventriloquist because you didn't just have to learn technique, you had to learn sort of writing comedy and things like that. But I've always wanted to break up my sort of cabaret type show with a bent bit in it and with a figure, a character. So I figured if I was going to go to a desert island, I would take a vendor with me and be forced to come up with a routine with just one of them. I've got lots of them here and all different styles and genres and that, but I've always just found it massively appealing to do a bit with it, but I've never had the guts to do it. There's other, lots of, it probably goes back to the thing we were talking about earlier, which is why it's interesting. You said about the cane being like kind of puppetry. I love, I've done the mind reading goose in the past, which doesn't require any kind of voice. I think every magician's probably got one or two, Rocky Raccoon knocking about, which, is really hard to do because, again, it's one of those tricks that's hard to do without it feeling derivative of Williamson, because he's so well known for it. But I think if I could just come up with the right routine, I just think it would be very funny, very amusing. It would completely break character. It would be a really odd thing. I would be the only magician to do it. I mean, Tom Malika used to do a bit with a rabbit, whose the name of the rabbit puppet of his completely escapes me. But Malika was one of my absolute favorite magicians of all time, and he was a very funny magician, did good stand-up magic, great sleight of hand, but also had this bit with the rabbit where he did this vent bit, and that's always really appealed to me. So I know it's not using it specifically for magic purposes, and that feels like a bit of a cheat. But I think feels like the most honest thing to say. I mean, there's other things I could say. I would take all my kit for making like impossible bottles and that, but I don't want to sit on an island doing that, What am I going to do with them? Chuck them in the ocean? Like, get help on the decks.
No, I think it's
no one to buy them.
It's within the same vein as magic, though, because it's still it's basically like a old school Saturday night entertainment. You would have ventriloquists, magicians, musicians.
Yeah, it's a prop. So my thinking has always been to come up with a routine, a magic routine that involves a ventriloquist doll, where you are kind of interacting with it and it is contributing towards it. I had a routine years ago that I thought of with a raccoon, Rocky Raccoon, which is called Psychic Roadkill, which involved kind of a mind reading raccoon. So I was trying to go completely opposite to what other people do with it, and wanted to make the kind of the raccoon doing this trick, and it was using like a Bartender sketchpad, all these other kind of mentalism stuff, but it wasn't really right. I just always like the idea of just doing something with it, just having this thing. I suppose as well there was, Wayne Dobson used to have Ringo Rabbit in his show, and it kind of broke it up a little bit. It was a different character. It's the idea of having another character on stage. I mean, I'm a big fan of David Strasman, who I saw 1996 Royal Variety performance. I was sitting at my nan's. He came on, he left the dummy Chatwood on stage, and it came to life. And I went, what the fuck's going on here? It was the most unbelievable thing we've ever seen. He'd just come back from Edinburgh, and I saw him live in the West End in 97 with all these different characters. And it only dawned on me then where I went, this is just one guy on stage. It feels like there's like 15 people up there, but it's just him and all these characters. I think he was one of the very first people to sort of leave the puppet, and it came alive. It was incredible. And it's always appealed to me since then. I've never had the guts to do it. I've probably spent as much on vent figures and puppets as I have over the years on magic. And one day I'd like, maybe I'll get there. I had a good routine with a baby for a while, which is a baby, because I thought it'd be quite funny if you did a baby cry and you went into the audience and someone had brought a baby with them and you got a bit annoyed and came out with a baby carrying it. It ended up being a puppet in it, and it was a baby. But I think there would have to be a magic element to it. I think the other thing I went quite a long way with was a pig. It's like a Muppet type one, which is over there somewhere. It was called. I've always had this thing about the kind of the thing being a mind reading thing. Can't remember what it was called. Psychic pig. I can't think. There's a theme here, isn't there? Psychic raccoon, psychic pig.
I mean,
I've got very limited knowledge of ideas.
Arguably, Wayne Dobson has done ventriloquism in his act, but he just normally uses celebrities of some kind.
Well, the voices, yeah. I mean, again, that idea, because one of my heroes, Malika, he used to kind of have this thing where I think was it the Stevens Magic tape, or maybe an international one. Definitely one I watched at Peter's once when he had it there. I turned up for work and he had it on, and we just sat and watched the whole thing. It was hilarious. And he used to do a thing where he used to say to a woman, "Shuffle the cards out," and he used to do a little voice, and he used to have this little voice that he kind of said and spoke on their behalf. And it's a really funny idea. I think the idea of using people is still very, you know, certainly magicians remember that as Wayne's routine, and Malika when he was doing close up and at the bar. I can't, you know, the masks and that has been done to death and probably slightly ruined by like celebrity juice, where they sort of overdone the sort of putting a mask on someone. I just always, one day I'll get the guts to kind of really write up 5 minutes of material with a character and give it a kind of thing and do it in the middle, because, you know, I do really love it. I love the idea of it, and I think it would just bring a really different element. It's something that no one else does. That's what makes it difficult, isn't it? Which is why it's a good idea, because if everyone's doing it, you can go, well, that person does this, this, this. You're trying to take all these frames of reference, then you're probably copying, which is not a good idea. So, yeah, I think if I was hopping on my little boat to the desert island, I'd take a little tiny suitcase with a little figure in it, you know, and try and come up with a routine at long last and do something with it.
Great.
One day, you know.
I think that's a great choice and a great list. Probably one of the most diverse lists that we've had. Like I said, dancing canes, swallowing needles, ring flight, mind spy, cementalism, billing kiwi, a deck of cards. Yeah, it's a really, really diverse list. Really, really diverse. So where can people find out more about you, Chris, if they want to find out more?
I'm on all the normal things. I think I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Chris Harding. I think it's Chris Harding Magic. Instagram is probably the same on Instagram, Twitter. Facebook, I've just got a normal profile, Chris Harding. I've got lots of magician friends. I'm always happy to sort of talk to people about magic and that. And, you know, especially with things like competitions, if people are thinking of entering like the magic circle and just want a bit of reassurance, it's, you know, I'm always happy to help people out if I can. And, yeah, I just love it. I mean, that's what I love about this kind of, I mean, I've loved listening to these podcasts, these Desert Island ones, because I think you can learn so much about people that you wouldn't normally perhaps get if we just go into like, how did you get into magic? What did you do? What did you do? So I think the tricks and things that you pick for this kind of discussion probably say more about you than perhaps some of the things you've done. And they're probably a bit more interesting. And, you know, and if any, similarly, you know, I'm on all the social channels. I think my website's like Chris Harding Magic, and you can email me through it. If anyone's got any questions about any of this stuff on here, or they want more on where to kind of look stuff up, then, you know, obviously just get in touch. I'm always just sitting, waiting for correspondence from anyone. Twitter, Facebook, MySpace, anything.
Because he's on his desert island. Excellent. Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you for sharing your list with us. It's a great one. And I know that certainly I'm going to be going to look up The Brain Shows Off by Harry Anderson. I will be going to check that one out because it sounds great.
Brilliant.
So thank you so much,
Thanks, Jamie.
Chris.
Thanks for doing this.
We will be back soon with another episode of Desert Island Tricks. Goodbye.
Hi, Peter Nardi here, and I really hope you enjoyed that podcast. I just wanted to let you know that Alakazam have their own app. You can download it from the App Store or the Google Play Store. By downloading the app, it will make your shopping experience even slicker at Alakazam. You'll also get exclusive in-app offers and in-app live streams. So go download it now, and we'll see you on the next podcast.